going on, YouTube universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, but more importantly, welcome to another edition of the newly revamped Round Recap, where we sit down and take time to reflect on the previous round of AFL action. And round 14 was a very peculiar round. It was one where either the game fell within a couple of kicks or the game was an absolute obliteration, and it's starting to show stark contrast, I feel, between teams that are competing for the premiership and teams that are well and truly well off the mark. It is becoming I wouldn't say a joke, but it's almost, you know, seeing all of these percentage boosting wins that the top teams are getting, I think is starting to show a little bit of disparity between teams and where lists are currently at. And surprisingly, it's lists that are older lists that, you know, people externally are saying, you know, they're going to be outside of that window because they're getting too old. These are the teams that are continuing to deliver. But again, another round that showed some upsets, I suppose, very much so for some particular games, and it very much has myself still questioning where certain teams are sitting within this competition. This year's been a ride. It's been a roller coaster, and we sometimes feel we know where all of these teams are sitting, and then a spanner is thrown into the works. Round 14 had 7 games, and it's time for us to get into the action, kicking off on Thursday night with St Kilda hosting the Bulldogs at Marvel Stadium. Before this game even started, it provided one of the biggest AFL memes I think 2025 is going to see. Every single game of AFL starts with a coin toss, and they usually get somebody from the crowd, somebody who's won a contest via you know, a club, or, you know, somebody that the club recognizes and gives the opportunity to. And this poor bloke tosses the coin and does his hamstring. I'm not even kidding. It's meme worthy. It's been all over the place. He's been on the news. It spelt doom, I feel, for St Kilda, considering he was a St Kilda supporter. And I think that kind of just flowed through with how St Kilda played. They looked very hamstrung, for lack of better word, because they got absolutely obliterated in this game. And it's starting to pose questions as to how good this list truly is. Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira was put under the microscope. I think he turned the ball over 10 times, and out of those 10, I think 5 or 6 of those resulted in direct shots on goal for the Bulldogs. And just forward half of the ball, they're very dysfunctional. They're very haphazard. We know Max King has been injured all year. He has only recently been reported to have suffered yet another setback. So I honestly think we won't see Max King play for St Kilda in 2025. And with all of these rumours circulating that he is quote-unquote gettable, is this the last time we have seen him play for St Kilda for his career? Does he move on elsewhere? They obviously delisted Tim Membry. He's now flying at Collingwood, providing a solid forward target for them, and they're having to rely on young kids like Keeler, or, you know, having to throw Cooper Sharman up forward, or Jack Higgins being their lead goal kicker as a small crumbing forward is a little bit insane. He's very Stephen Milne-esque in the way he attacks the ball, and, you know, just that little pop-up forward that, you know, is needed when needed. And I don't understand where the drop-off from St Kilda has happened, because I feel they have built a list very comprehensively. They have targeted particular players that have given a boost to the club in general, and just, it should be these acquisitions that are helping propel the club forward. But I feel, and feel free to disagree, I feel it's Ross Lyon's coaching that is holding them back, because he is still very too defensively sound. I feel he is still in the mindset of the early St Kilda days where he was the coach. You know, when he went to Fremantle and he turned Fremantle into a defensively sound team. It's all good to base your game on defense, but then if everything else is falling apart around the contest and you don't have answers for it, it shows that you're very one note. And I feel Ross Lyon, as much of a great coach he is, I've had the privilege of being mentored by him as a junior football coach, you know, going through coaching courses and all that kind of stuff. Ross Lyon was somebody who I was able to lean on for information, and he's a great bloke. Don't get me wrong at all. I I have a lot of respect for him and what he has done for the game, but I think the game has passed him. I think he's still very set in his ways from a more quote-unquote bygone era of AFL. I don't think his game style has adapted to the new rule changes, and I feel he's not the man that's going to take St Kilda to their next flag, so it might be time that they start hunting around. The Bulldogs, on the other hand, vastly impressive considering Marcus Bontempelli was tagged out for most of this game and then injured, so had very little impact. I think he only had like 13 or 14 disposals, if I'm not mistaken. Very un-Bontempelli-like. But with the rise of all of these next tier players that have stepped up their game this year, the Bulldogs have been a complete outfit. You know, Tom Liberatore I've always considered an A-grader, but he's been flying this year. Should be in calculations for All-Australian. Ed Richards has gone to an A-grader this year, in my opinion. Could very well be giving the Brownlow a decent shake-up as far as the Bulldogs players are concerned. I feel they're doing so much better without Jamara Ugle-Hagan in the team, and the big announcement this week is that he has returned to training and he's got his mind set on returning. I still have reservations about things that he has done. I personally don't feel the Bulldogs should be wasting their time. Not going to get into that today. We don't want to get too political, but the scoreline of this game just speaks volumes to where both of these teams are at. It was Bulldogs from the get-go. At quarter time, they led 4-2-26 to 1-4-10. At halftime, it was 10-4-64, leading 5-6-36. Three-quarter time ballooned out to 16-9-105, playing 7-9-51, and the final score was 20-12-132, defeating St Kilda 8-12-60. Very stark when you look at the second half of football. The Bulldogs went on to kick 10 goals 8 versus St Kilda's 3 goals 6. Incredibly inaccurate, and I think inaccuracy is the key factor to this round, and it has been a highlight for some teams over the last few rounds, but this weekend in particular, inaccuracy was costing teams big time. Now, I'm not at all saying St Kilda's inaccuracy lost them this game, because I mean 32 scoring shots to 20, they still lose if they kicked all of their goals. But this was this was very, very, very much so a dominant performance from the Bulldogs, who have now, scalped 70-plus point win, 90-plus point win, another 70-plus point win here. It still has us begging, and the conversation point last week, after they lost to Hawthorn by Kane Corns and David King, was the Bulldogs overhyped, and they come out and they absolutely bully St Kilda. Now, St Kilda this year, to me, have been playing a brand that is synonymous with a bottom 5, bottom 6 team. So, okay, yeah, you could probably go down the path of maybe the Bulldogs were flat track bullying a little bit here. But if they can do this against teams that are competing for the premiership, they are very much still within that window. I feel they are just outside of where I'm placing other teams when it comes to who can win the premiership this year and who can't. But the Bulldogs, if they get a solid run, can definitely give it a red-hot crack. They're only just on the cusp for me. I feel if they can get a solid win or two against some of the competing teams, then they can start getting thrown around in that conversation. But nonetheless, the round kicking off with a 72-point win to the Bulldogs, absolutely huge. That being said as well, obviously with a win that big, when it comes to the votes I've handed out for this game, no surprise that it goes the way of 3 Bulldogs for the 3-2-1. First and foremost, I'm giving one vote to the returning Sam Darcy. I feel he has brought a lot back into this team. He is the one player they have been missing the most. I feel if Marcus Bontempelli was not playing in this Bulldogs team, they would still be performing rather well, because Ed Richards, Liberatore, those players have lifted their game to the next level. Joel Frazier has stepped up his game. Riley West stepped up his game. But Sam Darcy is that one key component I feel they have been missing the most since going down with that knee injury earlier in the season. He came back, he was absolutely firing, and I'm going to make a very bold call here. A lot of people throw out the conversation, would you rather take Nick Dacos or Sam Darcy? I honestly feel Sam Darcy could be the first $2 million a year player. Very hard to come by a player of his talent and his ceiling for improvement to not consider him potentially the best player in the competition. He's got a long way to go in the way of growth, and that growth is only going to get better considering how good he already is. He's stupidly tall, and he should not be able to be doing the things at ground level that he does. He just makes Bulldogs so incredibly better, and I feel if not all of the remaining 17 teams in the competition weren't keen on throwing money at this guy to get him over, they would be absolutely stupid. His stats ran down for the game saw him obtain 19 disposals, 12 kicks and 7 handballs, 9 marks, 4 tackles, 8 hitouts, 2 clearances, 304 metres gained, 3 goals, and the 9 score involvements. Shifting to the 2 votes for this round, I have given it to Bailey Dale, who should be in calculations for All-Australian halfback flank. He has been absolutely solid for them this year. He racked up 36 disposals, 23 kicks and 13 handballs, 10 marks, 3 clearances, 628 metres gained, and had the 6 score involvements. And my best on ground, we've already touched on him earlier, is Ed Richards. He has been absolutely superb this season. He had the 25 disposals, 17 kicks, 8 handballs, 2 marks, 7 tackles, 7 clearances, 521 metres gained, kicked the 1 goal, and had a game-high 11 score involvements. This is what makes the Bulldogs so scarily good. They now can go to a different level without Marcus Bontempelli having to rise to the occasion. Which begs the question, if teams come knocking and Marcus Bontempelli wants to leave, do they facilitate that? Do they lock him down for a further contract? There's now a big thing going around that Collingwood have been persisting hard off field to pick him up for next year. Does it happen? I don't know. But at any rate, Bulldogs kicking off round 14 with a 72-point win. Friday night football, University of Tasmania Stadium saw Hawthorn hosting Adelaide. I was convinced this was a game Adelaide would chop absolutely up. Hawthorn got a win against the Bulldogs the week prior, but I felt Adelaide just collectively have had more continuity to their game over the last month and a half to 2 months. And this game was so incredibly scrappy. It was a game that you might be able to notch up to conditions. It was incredibly cold. It was wet. If anything, it has created a conversation point for Tasmania needing a stadium that has a rooftop on it. And we know that currently the scope of this Tasmanian team that is in conversation and trying to be built is kind of on the rocks at the moment. We don't know now whether if this team is going to happen because of things that are going down over there. Not going to dive into that too much, but Hawthorn picked up a 3-point win here against an Adelaide team that was incredibly wasteful in front of goal. Now, don't get me wrong, Hawthorn were just as equally wasteful, but I feel the players that were wasteful for Adelaide more often than not kicked the goals that they missed. I believe Tex Walker, Riley Thilthorpe and Josh Rochelle between them kicked 8 of the 14 behinds that Adelaide kicked for this game. I know there was a couple of goals that were almost dead in front that were missed. Tex Walker kicked a dribbler that missed 9 times out of 10. He kicks that. Josh Rochelle had a couple that he missed. He normally kicks those. Riley Thilthorpe had a crack from the boundary that I thought went through. He missed. Very wasteful. Very wasteful. Especially coming off of a win the week prior against Brisbane that saw them win because Brisbane was wasteful. It kind of like they traded hand here. I don't know whether this speaks to the quality of the football both of these teams can play, because a lot of people have been saying as far as quality of football goes, this was one of the worst games of the year, and I probably tend to agree with that given the scope of how things were, the scrappy nature. I don't know whether there's any excuse for it, but, you know, some players lived up to expectations, some just failed, and ultimately Adelaide fumbled a win that they very well should have ran away with, given the scoreline for most of the game actually was in favour of Adelaide, and then Adelaide just struggled. At quarter time, they led 2-3-15 to the just 2 behinds from Hawthorn. At halftime, it was 4-7-31 leading 2-4-16. At 3-quarter time, Adelaide had only managed to kick 4 behinds, leading 4-11-35 to 4-7-31, and then the final score, 5-14-44, being defeated by 6-11-47. After half-time, Adelaide only kicked 1 goal 7 for the game. Hawthorn managing to kick 4 goals 7. As I said, that second half was just a scrap fest. It was very hard to watch. Not much more to speak about, really. I feel maybe the tactical sub of Luke Pedlar out of this game was very damning for Adelaide, because Luke Pedlar, while he doesn't get, a groundbreaking amount of touches every game, he lays tackles, he puts on pressure, and I feel they missed that in the dying moments of this game when the game was on the line. Jai Newcomb was being held accountable throughout the entire game. He manages to break away and kick the final goal. A lot of people are questioning whether or not Jack Gunston threw the ball to him or whether he handballed it. Equally, dying moments of the game, just before the siren goes, free kick is paid to Darcy Fogarty. Jack Ginnivan knocks the ball away. I feel 9 times out of 10, if that is during the second or third quarter, the umpire is paying a 50-metre penalty. Penalty's not paid. Umpire blows the whistle, game over. Doesn't even let Darcy Fogarty take the shot from where he's at. I mean, he was on the wing, so it's a fair way out. But normally in circumstances like that, you let a player have a crack, because you never know. You never know if the ball's going to go over the top and go through. It's going to bounce through. But a lot of conjecture coming out of this game. Prior to that, there was instances where Fogarty punched the ball directly out of bounds. It could have been deliberate, probably should have been deliberate, wasn't paid. Dawson stepped the ball over the line, wasn't paid. Hawthorn did one, it was paid, and then vice versa. Hawthorn were getting away with it, Adelaide were getting pinged. It was very scrappy, and if anything, it was scrappy by the players that were playing, it was scrappy by the umpiring department. It was just a very, very hard watch. We're just going to get straight to the votes here. It was broken up between 2 teams, because I felt there was a player from Adelaide that needed to get just desserts for his performance in this game, but the one vote I have given to Jarman Impey off of halfback for Hawthorn. He had 28 disposals, 19 kicks and 9 handballs, 10 marks, 4 tackles, 2 clearances, 756 metres gained, and the 4 score involvements. The 2 vote I have given to Jordan Dawson. Definitely best on ground for Adelaide. 24 disposals, 14 kicks, 10 handballs, 3 marks, 7 tackles, 4 clearances, 513 metres gained, and the 6 score involvements. Definitely feel at this point of the year, he will be top 3, top 4 in the Brownlow count. He's going to be giving this a red-hot crack this year. He has been sensational. And best on ground for me, he has been quiet this year, well off the mark to where he is truly, should have been given his track record. But Dylan Moore, I feel, was best on. 23 disposals, 12 kicks, 11 handballs, the 3 marks, 13 tackles, 3 clearances, 428 metres gained, and the 5 score involvements. Everybody getting up and about. They're saying Hollywood Hawks are back. I don't think so. This was a game that Adelaide well and truly should have put away by 3 or 4 goals. But Hawthorn have beaten a team that is contending in the top 8. And that is the biggest talking point we can take away from this game. Because prior to that, they had only defeated GWS sitting inside the top 8. The Bulldogs were outside of it when they defeated the Bulldogs. They knocked off Adelaide. Can they build momentum and knock off other teams that are within this top 8 fixture? Remains to be seen. The first on Saturday saw Brisbane hosting GWS at the Gabba. This was a game that I felt Brisbane could not fumble. I thought, chip on their shoulder, they lost a close contest, very inaccurate the week prior against Adelaide. They're going to take GWS and put them to the sword. GWS have travelled a lot this year. They haven't really lived up to expectation all too much on the road against the competing teams. So I thought Brisbane would win this game quite comfortably. And that was not the case, because GWS absolutely rolled them in a contest that yet again, back-to-back weeks, Brisbane's inaccuracy has cost them 4 points. They very well should have won the last 2 games, 8 points in the bank, and they'd still be locking away a top 4 spot. If they continue to play the type of football they're playing, they could be at danger of dropping out of that top 4, which could come costly during September. Good friend of mine, DR, from SUPERCOACH with DR, put out a little notice to Brisbane telling them to kick the ball between the big sticks. It's pretty fucking straightforward. When you kick 13 goals, 18, you have 31 registered shots on goal against a team that only manages 22. You have 9 more registered shots and you lose the game by 11 points. Brisbane should have obliterated them. This should have been 5, 6, 7 goals the way of Brisbane comfortably. However, that being said, even with inaccuracy, this was a game that saw 3 big bags of goals kicked. It was a coming-of-age game for Logan Morris for Brisbane. It was a coming-of-age game for Aaron Cadman from GWS. And it was a game where Jesse Hogan just stepped up and did Jesse Hogan things, continuing what we saw last year on the back of him winning the Coleman medal. It was a hard watch. I don't know whether things are just breaking down for Brisbane forward of the ball because there's no Joe Danaher. That's the conjecture this year. Jackson Payne went down with a knee injury that I have heard may have ended his season, and I think that might have been pretty telling because after that fact, they moved Eric Hipwood to centre-half back effectively, and he played on Aaron Cadman, and Aaron Cadman went on to kick 5 goals. So, as much as it was a huge game for Aaron Cadman, I feel we need to acknowledge the fact that he was playing on Eric Hipwood, who was acting as a key defender. I think anybody could have kicked 5. I think I could have gone out there and, probably would have had a heart attack with all the running that I would have had to have done, but I think I might have been able to kick 5 against Eric Hipwood. Let's be real here. But it was still a great showing from GWS with no Toby Green, the captain down. He would have been very influential on this game, I feel. Finn Callaghan came back in and was very influential on the game. Lockie Whitfield in defence, both of those putting their hands up for All Australian Blazers this year. Very, very comprehensive win. Very much so. Can't say much else about this game at all. The scoreline speaks volumes. It was definitely a game that at one point I thought Brisbane had well and truly locked up, and it's probably been the tale of the tape for Brisbane this year because they've been in this position many times before, and I've spoken about it in almost every single round recap up until this point in time. If Brisbane leaves the door open for better teams, they are going to get absolutely destroyed, and this is what happened. At quarter time, they led GWS 5-5-35 to 5 straight 30. At halftime, it was Brisbane 9-10-64, leading 8 goals straight 48. At three-quarter time, GWS stemmed the flow back, and it was 12-3-75, leading Brisbane's 10-13-73, and the final scoreline saw GWS 17-5-107, defeating Brisbane 13-18-96. Just to put to a scope for you, GWS didn't miss a shot in the first half, and then they went on in the third term to kick 4 goals 3 versus Brisbane's 1 goal 3, and then in the final term, Brisbane went on to kick 3 goals 5 versus the GWS's 5 goals 2. Again, inaccuracy, costing. It was huge, and it was misses from players that you wouldn't usually expect to miss. There were a lot of players that really squandered opportunity forward half of the ball. We'll have a look right here to see who some of the culprits were. Calamarchi kicked 3 behinds. Hugh McCluggage kicked 2. Jared Berry kicked 2. Zach Bailey kicked 2. Will Ashcroft kicked 2. Charlie Cameron only kicked the 1 behind for the game. There was a more even spread of goal kickers for GWS, but it was just the inaccuracy of some of these players that you're usually just seeing for Brisbane stand tall and clutch and kick these goals that truly cost them. So it's no surprise when it comes to the votes of this game, I just leaned on the 3 players that kicked a bag, and I think justifiably so. The 1 vote goes to Logan Morris. He had 15 disposals, 9 kicks, 6 handballs, 7 marks, 180 metres gained, 5 goals, and the 9 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to Aaron Cadman. He had 19 disposals, 15 kicks, 4 handballs, 13 marks, 1 tackle, 406 metres gained, 5 goals, and 8 score involvements. And Jesse Hogan gets the 3 votes. 16 disposals, 13 kicks, 3 handballs, 12 marks, 422 metres gained, 6 goals, and the 10 score involvements. This, to me, throws question marks around for both teams. Where does GWS truly sit in the fixturing of this top 8? Can they contend for a premiership? Are they too inconsistent to do so? And with Brisbane, they're losing games at the Gabba, and this is not a thing that we're used to seeing from Brisbane. We're not used to seeing them getting touched up at home. The Gabba's normally a fortress for them, and I think this is the 3rd loss this year, I believe, that they've lost at home. It's not good for them. It isn't. I still feel They are very much in this premiership window, and we know their best can win it. But when inaccuracy creeps in like this, and you'll see at the end of the video when we talk about the ladder just how big the last 2 wins would have been for them when it comes to that kind of fixturing of that top 8. It's hard to see what the future holds for Brisbane, because it's not something we're used to seeing. I'm rambling, I'm perplexed, I don't know, but GWS picking up a much needed win to keep their finals hopes running. Brisbane, will inaccuracy keep them from winning games that should be very much winnable, and it could see them drop out of that top 4? As I said, they could see themselves miss a double chance and bounced out the first week of finals if they finish outside of that top 4. That'd be huge. Later on Saturday afternoon at the MCG, we saw Essendon host Geelong in an absolute whitewash, a bloodbath. Whatever descriptive you would like to use for an absolute fucking smacking, that is what Geelong delivered to Essendon. It was fucking disgusting, this game. It was hard to watch. It was very hard to watch, and I felt Essendon were always going to have their backs against the wall here. I said it leading into my tipping video for this particular round. The defensive line missing the players that they are missing for Essendon was going to have Geelong get absolutely off the chain. I said Jeremy Cameron would kick 5 or 6. I'm pretty sure he achieved that. It was a game where Max Holmes got absolutely off the chain. Bailey Smith. Now, Bailey Smith, very interesting conversation point here, because I've been getting dragged on social media for a comment I made. The AFL glazed him a bit this week. You know, he had 41 touches, he had, 9 score involvements or something like that. But when you break down the disposal efficiency he had, he ran at 58%, which means, just as a common trend that we have seen from him this year, tap it down to Bailey Smith, or Bailey Smith gets the ball, he'll bang it on long, and it's a raffle as to whether or not he's going to turn it over, or whether it hits the chest of a Geelong player. Now, anybody I feel can rack up 40 disposals, getting it tapped to them and just blazing long. It takes a very elite player to use the ball better. Now, I turn around and said a comment effective to the tune of, he ran at 58% disposal efficiency. Imagine how elite he would be if he cleaned up his efficiency. And then people started coming at me, calling me a peanut, and calling me this and that, saying that, oh, he had fucking 9 score involvements, he had this many inside 50s, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he did that with the 58% that he had, but what's rolling with the other 42%? He's turning the ball over, and I feel it's very much a conversation point that's not being had. He has been great for Geelong this year, don't get me wrong, but his ball use could be a hell of a lot better. But that being said, he's still got 41 touches in this game, and they weren't able to contain him. It was comprehensively one of Geelong's best wins, and they made it look easy. They made it look easy, and this is why I said a couple of weeks ago, with the fixturing Geelong has been given for the back half of the year, if they don't finish within the top 2, they have fumbled their fixture. They should get a very comfy run heading into finals, and this very much paves the way for them appearing in another grand final. They have such a... I'm not going to say easy, I'm going to say soft. They've got a very soft run comparatively to other teams around them within the premiership conversation. Scoreline speaks volumes. Says it all. At quarter time, Geelong 6-3-39 led Essendon 2-4-16. Half time, it was 9-6-60 leading 3-7-25. Three-quarter time, ballooned out to 16-8-104 leading 8-7-55. And then the final term, 23-13-151, defeated Essendon's 8-8-56. Now, Essendon managed only 3 goals in the first half, and then they managed to only kick 5 for the second. In the first half, Geelong kicked 9. In the second half, they went on to kick 14. This could have been a hell of a lot worse, considering after halftime they also kicked 7 behinds. This could have been 110, 120 plus point win. It could have. It's just percentage boosting, and I feel Geelong are going to do a lot of percentage boosting on the run home to finals. Percentage, I don't know whether it's going to come into a play for them, but as long as they keep winning this emphatically, It's a question that I'm asking about Collingwood. Who's going to be the next team to defeat Collingwood? Who's going to be the next team to defeat Geelong? At this point in time, it is hard to see a grand final that isn't Geelong versus Collingwood, because they are easily the best two teams in the competition right now. Huge game. Absolutely huge. Before I get into the votes, we just need to talk about who contributed to this Geelong win, because it was absolutely outstanding. As I said, Jeremy Cameron kicked 6, Shannon Neal kicked 4, Sean Manor kicked 3, Dempsey kicked 2, Dangerfield kicked 2, Stengel kicked the 1, Stanley kicked 1, Myers kicked 1, Lawson Humphreys kicked 1, Max Holmes kicked 1, Brad Close kicked 1. Very comprehensive win. This was huge. This was absolutely incredible. You know, Will Setterfield, Jai Caldwell went to work for Essendon. They tried hard. They both laid 10 tackles each for the game. They led disposals for Essendon as well. So probably very stiff to miss conversational points. But I mean, if a team wins by 95 points, there is no way, I feel at least, that anybody from the losing team would get any form of Brownlow votes or recognition from anybody in a voting kind of form. You know, teams of the week and things like that, definitely. I can't justify it. I can't. I can give votes to somebody in a losing team, and I have done before, but not when you're losing by this much. There's no way. And the 3-2-1, I think, pretty much sums up the best three on the ground, and I don't think anybody can argue with this. The one vote I've given to Jeremy Cameron. He had the 14 disposals, 13 kicks, the 1 handball, 6 marks, 289 metres gained, 6 goals, and 10 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to Bailey Smith, 41 disposals, 28 kicks and 13 handballs, 7 marks, 2 tackles, 6 clearances, 765 metres gained, and the 9 score involvements. And best on ground comfortably was Max Holmes, 36 disposals, 25 kicks, 11 handballs, 4 marks, 4 tackles, 8 clearances, 871 metres gained, 1 goal, and 7 score involvements. As I said, I always had Essendon outside of finals calculations this year. I just felt that with the young kids they're kind of bringing through, they weren't going to be in that conversation point this year. It could hold them in better stead because they've had to debut all of these young kids probably ahead of time. And that's where I feel teams like Essendon, teams like Richmond, you know, they're going to be teams that at some point in time, the tables are going to turn in this league, and it's going to be the young rebuilding teams that are going to be flipped on top of the ladder, because all of these teams that are currently competing, well, most of them anyway, Collingwood and Brisbane and Geelong, when these older players drop out of circulation, is the young core going to be good enough? You could probably argue for Geelong, yes, it will be, because they just find a way to keep bringing in this young talent. But I feel Essendon, or long term, are going to be a hell of a lot better. Just in the short term, injury is hampering them quite severely, and Geelong, they're just fast-tracking their way to possibly another premiership. And a lot of people are saying, hopefully they do, because it's going to keep a premiership off Collingwood. I honestly couldn't care, because I think Collingwood and Geelong this year, both very deserving of taking another flag home. Saturday night saw North Melbourne hosting Fremantle at Optus Stadium. No, you heard me correctly, Optus Stadium. Now, this was a very funny prospect, because Alistair Clarkson came out after this game and said they'd love to be like Collingwood and play all of their games at the MCG. But yet I'm wondering, and I'm trying to question, wasn't it North Melbourne that sold this home game to Optus Stadium? Like, to Western Australia? If that was the case, I don't think we can be making comments about wanting to play at the MCG all the time. And unfortunately, with some Victorian-based teams, more often than not, they are going to play most of their games at the MCG or at Marvel Stadium, because most of the competition is built within Victoria, so there's not going to be much travelling going by certain teams. And that's where people talk about Vic bias and all that kind of stuff, but we're not knocking on that fucking door. This was a very close contest. This was a close contest to the point where North Melbourne, I feel, at some point were stiffed by some decisions. There was a tackle that was laid on Bailey Banfield late in the game where he definitely didn't dispose of the ball properly. Should have been pinned for holding the ball, but the umpire didn't pay it. And we've seen games between North Melbourne and Fremantle in the past come down to less than a kick, where controversially the game has gone one way and not the other. North Melbourne, to their credit, this was a good hard fight back, because when you look at the score line that saw them at three-quarter time trailing quite severely, to see them come back and only fall by the 6 points, huge effort for them, especially on the road to be playing at Optus Stadium. At quarter time, they led Fremantle 3-1-19 to 2-5-17. At halftime, Fremantle skipped ahead to 7-6-48, playing 4-3-27. And at three-quarter time, it was Fremantle 9-9-63, leading 6-5-41. 22 points clear, and I thought this was where Fremantle were going to put the foot down, and this was going to become a percentage-boosting win for them. But the scoreline in the end was 10-13-73, defeating 10-7-67. Again, inaccuracy creeping in and costing Fremantle a much bigger win, and a little bit of inaccuracy from North Melbourne costing them late as well. There were a couple of late shots that went awry that I thought were very gettable. Obviously, the biggest one was young Finn O'Sullivan running in, trying to kick the ball off the deck through for a goal. Fresh airy, missed the ball completely. He'll be ruining that decision. He's getting dragged for it on social media. He's a young kid in his first year. I don't think we should be so harsh. But Fremantle walk away with a 6-point win in a game that I was actually convinced they were going to get a very big percentage booster. I don't know where the conversation point for this game should be. Should this game be North Melbourne played incredibly well? Should this be Fremantle weren't good enough? And this is a point that we've been trying to make about Fremantle all year. The inconsistency in their game is just too fluctuating for me to determine whether or not they're going to play finals this year. This is a game they should have won by 4, 5, 6 goals. On paper, they should have absolutely put North Melbourne to the sword, but North Melbourne found a way to dig deep, and you've got to give them credit. It's hard to sit here as a neutral supporter, and I could see it from an angle as a Richmond supporter watching Richmond. So I'm feeling North Melbourne supporters might feel the same. With games like this, when you come so close, it's going to sting, but it gives you hope that these young kids that are playing and getting opportunities are building towards the future, and the future's going to look bright. North Melbourne are going to be incredibly deadly once they hit their straps. They have young kids covering all facets of the board that are really going to break this competition apart, and I honestly believe that. They've got Nick Larkey up forward, who I feel is still struggling on his own. Jack Darling's offered him a little bit, don't get me wrong, but I feel they need another key forward that's really going to lift and provide for them. They traded their future first rounder for Matt Whitlock that they picked up in the draft last year. Richmond have now that pick that they traded. Is he going to be the answer? I don't know whether he will be or not. His upside is huge, so he very well may be, but he's got a long way to go to be up until that point. Colby McKercher coming through. He's starting to show a lot of good signs. George Wardlaw showing a lot of signs. Harry Sheasel speaks for himself. These older players that they've brought in, like Caleb Daniel and Luke Parker, they're going to impart a lot of leadership and knowledge onto this unit. I think definitely long-term, down the line, they're going to be playing finals football. But for right now, you need to ride this momentum, or lack thereof sometimes, for what it's worth. You know you're going to lose games if you're a North Melbourne supporter, if you're a Richmond supporter, if you're a West Coast supporter. But something's going to give at some point in time. Your club's going to hit their stride, and something's going to change, because all these young kids that are getting opportunity now are the future of the competition, and they're going to be all better for getting this experience early. Fremantle on the flip side, I don't know. Arguably, and I've said it, when you look at every single list in the competition, this is a top 4 list. Defensively, forward of the ball, in the middle, some of the best names in the competition. Can't question that. I honestly feel that. You can throw GWS in the mix. Collingwood's definitely in the mix. Geelong in that mix. I would say on paper, those are the 4 best lists comprehensively for each position. Some other teams might be just short of the mark, like a Bulldogs, because they don't have that proper forward configuration. But Fremantle just fumbling games, they could have lost this, and it would have been very embarrassing for them to lose a game that North Melbourne is holding as their home game in Fremantle. This is Let's get to the votes. Fremantle are just a conundrum. My sister is a Fremantle fan. I can only feel, or think how she fucking feels about close contests like this. She's happy for the win, but not happy because it was so close. I don't know. But the one vote I am going to give to Harry Sheasel. I thought he was best on for North Melbourne. He was one of the best on the night. 32 disposals, 15 kicks, 17 handballs, 9 marks, 6 tackles, 3 clearances, 282 metres gained, 1 goal, and the 3 score involvements. Andrew Brayshaw getting the 2 votes, very synonymous with Fremantle, and when they're flying, he performs incredibly well. 31 disposals, 18 kicks, 13 handballs, 6 marks, 9 tackles, 9 clearances, 679 metres gained, and 8 score involvements. And when Freo's flying, when Brayshaw's flying, his partner in crime, Caleb Sarong, is flying as well, and he gets the 3 votes for this game. 35 disposals, 19 kicks, 17 handballs, 2 marks, 10 tackles, 8 clearances, 585 metres gained, the 1 goal, and 6 score involvements. Where does that leave us with Fremantle? I don't know. They were almost upstaged by a very young North Melbourne team, a very inexperienced North Melbourne team. If they struggle against teams like this, how are they going to go against teams that are competing for the premiership? This is the conundrum we are facing. These are the question marks that they are now, holding up on their own accord. Going to be interesting watch to see with Fremantle, because I don't know. I haven't seen the ladder yet. I haven't checked the ladder yet. But when it comes to looking at the ladder, they're going to be either just inside of or just outside of the top 8. And fumbling games like this could be the differentiation between playing finals in September or just missing out because you just weren't good enough. The first of 2 on Sunday saw Port Adelaide hosting Melbourne at Adelaide Oval. I was very much convinced that after their win against GWS, they would come home and put Melbourne to work, and they did that, and they picked up the win by 25 points. This was a game that I watched, and in isolation, Melbourne, after quarter time, just looked very out of this game. They were out of their element, and Port Adelaide just put the foot down and skipped away with it. Melbourne have been a letdown this year, and Port Adelaide equally as well. I feel if we were to assess whether teams were on par with exceeded expectations or failed expectations, both of these teams have massively failed their expectations. Port Adelaide consistently have been a team that we have seen within finals calculation, prelims and everything else. I've been a little bit harsh and pretty steadfast on the way of saying that a pass mark for Port Adelaide would be to make the grand final, because we've seen so many prelim kind of, appearances, but we haven't seen them take that next step yet. And Melbourne starting their year off 0-5, I don't think many would have expected that, especially, even when they came up against Richmond, only winning by 20-odd points. It should have been a game they absolutely put away. And I fear for them long term, because when Max Gawn gets taken off the ground, Melbourne start to struggle big time. Will Christian Petrarca stay at Melbourne this year? I'm still convinced. Well, it probably blows up my theory now, because I did say a month or 2 ago, I felt Kozzie Pickett, Christian Petrarca, and Clayton Oliver were all going to get traded at the end of the year. Kozzie Pickett has just signed a multi-million-dollar 9-year deal. I made a joke on social media that Marlon Pickett was supposed to be the one that's being charged with theft, because I feel there is no way Kozzie Pickett has justified the amount of money that he is on. I feel there's a lot of glazing with him. Like, he'll come out and have a game where he kicks 3 or 4, don't get me wrong, but then he can go 2 or 3 games where he has little to no influence. I can't justify these 9-year deals. I mean, if it was a player like Nick Dacos, Sam Darcy, players that have solidified that their best is actually helping the team and they're so consistent in what they deliver, I can understand that. Generational talents, lock them away. Don't think of Kozzie Pickett on 9 years, multi-million dollars. I don't know, but I still feel Christian Petrarca could very well be on the way out. His body language just suggests it. Clayton Oliver, does he go to Geelong like it was rumoured last year? I don't know. Stephen May, they're now touting him as the anti-Coleman because he's giving up so many goals this year. He has been a shadow of himself. And when you see things on the field blowing up like last week between May and Gawn, is there inner turmoil still going on at Melbourne that is seeing results like this happen? We don't know. I honestly don't think Simon Goodwin is the man for the job anymore, and that could be a little bit harsh, but I feel part of this, even though they're saying there isn't a culture problem, I definitely feel there is, and I feel that culture problem only started when Simon Goodwin come along, and you've only got to look at the fact of why Adelaide got rid of Simon Goodwin, and you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? I think people who know. But, scoreline here. tail of the tape just speaks volumes. At quarter time, it was a very good contest. It was Port Adelaide leading 4-4-28 to 3-4-22. And then after that, it was just all Port Adelaide, all the way through. 9-6-60 leading 5-6-36 at halftime. 11-8-74 leading 8-11-59 at three-quarter time. And 14-9-93 defeating 9-14-68. After half-time, now it was only 24 points at half-time. 24 points, 4 goals. You can come back from that. And Melbourne have come back from that in the past. But for the second half to kick 4 goals, 8, and your opposition, I mean, equally, 5 goals, 3 is not too much considering 4 goals, 8. But 5 goals, 3, 4 goals, 8, you put into perspective, you only need to kick, you know, a couple of those behinds, you convert those into goals, and it's a closer game. You're putting everything on the line, but inaccuracy again comes in, creeps in, and costs the team a game of football. This was very winnable for Melbourne. It very was, even though it was away from home. Port Adelaide have just been playing a brand that allows some teams to dismantle them, and I feel Melbourne had the makeup to do so. But Port Adelaide just got the job done. It could be at risk of losing Jason Horne-Francis yet again. Now, Horne-Francis, I believe, only just came back in for this game, and he ended the game injured. I got to check what the injury was. It was a shoulder injury, and Aaliyah is listed as having suffered an injury too, but it says to be confirmed listed on the AFL website. So I'm not sure what that injury may truly be. This was a very coming-of-age game as well. Mitch Georgiades kicking 7. Again, as I said, Stephen May being the anti-Coleman, coughing up 7 goals to Mitch Georgiades. Yeah, very telling. Now, Kane Corns has come out and said Mitch Georgiades can press for All-Australian this year. I don't think that's the case. I definitely feel he needs to check bias at the door. When you're part of the panel that selects the All-Australian squad, you're an ex-Port Adelaide player, and you're now throwing Mitch Georgiades' name around after a 7-goal game. I don't know. It just speaks recency bias to me. I don't know. He had a great game, though. Don't get me wrong. He was one of the best over the course of the weekend. 7 goals is nothing to laugh at. I was just talking about how Pickett isn't worth the money, but he kicked 3 as well. But wasn't enough to get the job done, unfortunately, for Melbourne, falling the way of 25 points. Now, does this keep Port Adelaide in contention for finals at the end of the year? Maybe. The ladder will tell later on, but I think this loss, for Melbourne at least, pushes them down to the bottom echelon of teams that might be trying to scrap their way up the ladder. No surprise here. Voting went all the way of Port Adelaide for me for the 3-2-1 that I've handed out. Jason Horne-Francis gets the 1 vote with 29 disposals, 15 kicks and 14 handballs, 7 marks, 3 tackles, 7 clearances, 430 metres gained, 1 goal and 8 score involvements. The 2 vote goes to Connor Rozee. I said it last week, I'll say it again. His move to halfback is probably the best thing Port Adelaide have done all year. You can't, realistically in my eyes, have Rozee, Butters, and Horne-Francis all in the midfield at the same time. So they decided to reinvent the wheel. They moved Connor Rozee to halfback. They value his use of ball by foot, and he's gone to another level, I feel. I think this is his spot. This is where he needs to play. He had 32 disposals, 25 kicks and 7 handballs, 5 marks, 4 tackles, the 1 clearance, 776 metres gained, and 4 score involvements. And the 3 vote this week, I mean, if you kick 7 in a winning side, you've got to get the 3 vote, right? Mitch Georgiades picks it up this week. He had 18 disposals, 16 kicks and 2 handballs, 10 marks, 1 clearance, 430 metres gained, 7 goals, and 13 score involvements. As I said, is this a win? Back-to-back now for Port Adelaide that kind of pushes them into that bottom echelon of the top 8 and into calculations for finals? I don't know. I think Melbourne, we're almost putting a mark through them, which would be incredibly upsetting for their team. With their list, they've played some young kids this year, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that is any excuse for the lack thereof of effort that I think we've seen from them this year. The final game of the round was at Optus Stadium, West Coast hosting Carlton. I thought this was going to be a percentage booster for Carlton, and this is a game that really perplexes me. I watched the first quarter and didn't watch the rest of the game because I thought this was going to be 60-plus point win, comfortably put it in the books. At quarter time, Carlton led 7-4-46 to 1-1-7. They only managed to kick 40 points for the rest of the game. They kicked 40 in the first quarter and only kicked 40 for the rest. When you look at the breakdown of the score in the second half, they were rather abysmal, actually, Carlton. I don't know whether this was because Charlie Curnow got subbed off. I'd have to have a look through the stats in a second to see at what point he was subbed off. But the scoreline here, I've got to probably commend West Coast for allowing, you know, this to not be as big of a blowout as it was, as it could have been. As I said, quarter time 7-4-46 leading West Coast 1-1-7. Half time 10-8-68 leading 3-4-22. For the rest of the game, Carlton at three-quarter time were 11-11-77, leading 5-7-37, and then the final score was 12-14-86, leading 7-10-52. Carlton in the first half kicked 10 goals and only managed to kick 2 goals in the second half. They went on to kick 6 behinds, 2 goals 6 in a half of football. Eagles on the other side kicking 4 goals 6, so very inaccurate from them as well, but Carlton, I don't know whether it was complacency, they took the foot off the gas, I don't know. This should have been a very, very, very big win for them. A lot of positives to take out of this game for West Coast, if you're a West Coast supporter. Should have been a blowout, but you managed to stem the flow. Tom McCarthy gets picked up in the mid-season draft, and only a couple of weeks after being picked up, debuts in this game. Not only has the best debut of any West Coast player ever, but is the first player for 2025 for the Eagles to register more than 30 disposals in a game. That's telling. That is very telling, because before that, the comment I was making was their best player this year is an ex-Richmond player in Liam Baker. I thought Liam Baker has been their best player all year this year, comfortably, if you look over the course of the year. Jack Graham has been up there as one of their best. Again, another Richmond player they traded in. They bring in a young kid that's playing his first game of football, and he dominates as well as he did. A lot of people are saying, oh, he had a lot of kick-ins and everything else, but 31 disposals from a kid on debut against a forward line like Carlton's. That's huge. This kid's going to be something. He looks so good, and you can take away the kick-ins he had, fair enough, but he's still got a lot of the ball, a lot of intercept marks. He just looks ready to play football, this kid, and I'm a little bit upset that Richmond don't have him, because he was through our VFL system. It's another kid that played in Richmond's VFL system that Richmond didn't fucking pick up. Let's just add him to the list. Sam Davidson plays for the Bulldogs. Massimo D'Ambrosio gets drafted by Essendon, now plays for Hawthorn. All of these kids that we're developing under our nose just going elsewhere breaks my heart. But Carlton did run away with this game. Again, it needed to be the percentage booster, because they're at that point on the ladder, I feel, where these percentage boosting wins are going to play factor for these types of teams. For a team like Geelong, Brisbane, Collingwood, percentage I don't think is going to matter, because they still find ways to win. Carlton is still very much scrapping with a handful of teams. Percentage is going to be a deciding factor. So the fact that they can only get the job done by 34, I don't know if that speaks more about West Coast effort or the lack of effort from Carlton. Bringing up the match report, I'm just going to see at what point Curnow was subbed out. Halftime. So Curnow gets subbed out at halftime, and then they only managed to kick 2 goals for the rest of the game. So could have been telling more so if he had stayed in. Mitch McGovern kicking 3 and Fogarty kicking 3 pretty much sums up Carlton's lack of forward presence. I don't think Harry Mackay played this game. I think he's still out injured, and there's still conjecture about whether he might be having to undertake season-ending surgery to get some clean-up done. Again, it's another game where I thought to myself at quarter time this was going to be a blowout, and then Carlton just struggled. It just, to me, if they lose Harry Mackay, and a lot of talk has been they can't have Curnow and Mackay in the same team, they need to trade one. If they trade Mackay, example's sake, they trade Mackay at the end of the year, and then Curnow goes down injured, we're going to see games like this where they struggle to score. It's a very, very perplexed situation they find themselves in, Carlton, but they get the win nonetheless. West Coast, again, they get defeated, but they showed a lot of promise and signs in this game. So I feel some West Coast supporters are hanging their heads high. Others are probably a little bit doom and gloom. But that's how the round rounded out. Carlton winning by 34 in a game that I honestly thought they were going to win by 10 plus goals after that quarter time performance. Tale of two halves. Got to give credit where it's due to West Coast. I really feel these young kids, again, similar to North, Essendon, Richmond, going to be all the better for their exposure. With the votes, I actually am giving the one vote to Tom McCarthy. I can't look past the debut he had. He was just so good to watch. He had the 31 disposals, 19 kicks and 12 handballs, 6 marks, 1 tackle, 571 metres gained, and had the 3 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to Adam Chera, 30 disposals, 16 kicks, 14 handballs, 9 marks, 5 tackles, 3 clearances, 364 metres gained, and the 3 score involvements. And best on ground, and I feel this player, as well as Adam Chera, these two have been, I feel, the big improvers for Carlton this year, and it's George Hewitt. 35 disposals, 8 kicks, 27 handballs, 4 marks, 4 tackles, 7 clearances, 154 metres gained, and the 9 score involvements. Now, you have a look at some of the stat line here, and I just want to point out, like, Paddy Cripps, he had 21, but I feel he's not at the level he has been in recent years. Obviously, losing Sam Walsh for the year is going to hurt them, and this is where I feel injuries can mount up. I mean, if they lose Harry Mackay due to him potentially getting this surgery, who knows how bad this injury to Curnow is, whether they subbed him out just tactically because they were so far in front, I don't know. They're just putting him on wool. I mean, he kicked the 1 goal and only had the 5 disposals for the game, so didn't have really much of an influence in that first half anyway. It just starts begging the question, eventually injury does take its toll. I mean, you're talking to a Richmond supporter, and, you know, I've seen injuries hit a list hard, especially last year. But Carlton just limping over the line, essentially. I mean, 34 points isn't really a limp, but given the situation, I don't know whether we can talk about finals for football for Carlton this year. I just feel they're going to be one of those teams that just fall short, and I don't know whether injuries are going to hamper it. I don't know whether the inability to play at the same level that they are used to playing over recent years is going to cost them. I don't know, but they picked up the win, so let's see where that situates them on the ladder when the time comes. 7 rounds of football done and dusted and voted for, which means we can now turn our attention to how my top 5 is situated for the MVP award for the 2025 season. In 5th place, on 17 votes, we have Fremantle's Andrew Brayshaw. In 4th place, on 18 votes, we have Gold Coast Noah Anderson and Fremantle's Caleb Sarong. In 3rd place, on 21 votes, we have Collingwood's Nick Dacos. In 2nd place, on 22 votes, we have Geelong's Bailey Smith. And taking the lead on 23 votes, we have Adelaide's Jordan Dawson. Also, with all 7 games done and dusted, we can now turn our attention to the AFL ladder, and we can see after 14 games how the configuration of this ladder is shaping, because I'm telling you, some of these losses some of these teams are picking up are really going to be costly, especially for teams like Brisbane, and I'll show you why. In 1st place, they had the bye this week, but Collingwood still sit on top with 44 points. Sitting 1 game behind them, moving up into 2nd place, is Geelong on 40 points. Brisbane have dropped to 3rd place on 38. 2 games in a row they should have won. That would have had them situated on 46 points, leading by half a game. Big considering when you look at the total points of the teams underneath them, because Adelaide have dropped down to 4th place and Hawthorn have moved up to 5th place on 36 points each. Both of those teams only half a game behind Brisbane. You've then got the Gold Coast Suns, who have dropped to 6th, GWS, who are 7th, and Fremantle, who are 8th, all on 32 points. They are a game and a half behind Brisbane. You have got 5 teams knocking on the door of moving into that top 4 and potentially knocking Brisbane out. This is why I'm saying these losses that Brisbane have picked up because of inaccuracy are incredibly critical. This is the difference to them being on top of the ladder after 14 rounds and potentially sitting out of the top 4 after next week. But I think they've got the bye. They might have the bye. I don't know. But we'll talk about that when the time comes. Out of sight of the top 8, we have the Bulldogs knocking on the door in 9th place on 28 points. Carlton have moved up to 10th. Port Adelaide have moved up to 11th. And Essendon have moved down to 12th, all on 24 points equally. We have Sydney sitting in 13th. We have St Kilda, who have dropped to 14th, and Melbourne, who have dropped to 15th, all on 20 points equally. In 16th, we have North Melbourne on 14 points. In 17th, we have Richmond on 12 points. And in 18th place, we have West Coast sitting with the 4 points. There is only one thing for us to do before wrapping this video up, and that is to announce my team of the week for round 14. Some players were stiff, but that is the way when it comes to this kind of thing, and unfortunately I can't fit everybody into this team. I think comprehensively, this is the list that I felt was the best. Some players that are missing here that probably could have been in here. Asava Radicalea played well for Port Adelaide. Patrick Dangerfield played well for Geelong. Outside of that, I think I've nailed this. I think I've really got this locked in. So this is how my team of the week looks for round 14. In the back line, we have Bailey Williams and Lockie Ash in the back pockets, and Jacob Wietering at full back. Across half back, we have Bailey Dale and Lockie Whitfield, and Rory Lobb at centre half back. Across the midfield, we have Bailey Smith and Max Holmes on the wings, with Finn Callahan in the centre. Across half forward, we have Jeremy Cameron and Mitch Georgiades on the half forward flanks, and Sam Darcy at centre half forward. In the forward pockets, we have Aaron Cadman and Logan Morris, and we have Jesse Hogan at full forward. Max Gawn is in the ruck, with Caleb Sarong as ruck rover, and George Hewitt as rover. The interchange has Ed Richards, Dylan Moore, Connor Rosey, and Jarman Impey. Tom McCarthy is this week's sub, and coach of the round is Adam Kingsley for picking up that comprehensive win against Brisbane at the Gabba. That is it for this video. The round is officially recapped. Thank you so much for joining me as always. I would appreciate it if you hit that like button down below if you're enjoying the content I put out. Feel free to hit that subscribe button if you want to get on board the community we are building here. If you've got any hot takes for AFL you would like to share, if you want to tell me how your team's going, how you feel about the voting that I'm doing, the team of the week that I'm compiling, if you've got any ideas for content you would like to see, the comment section is always open, and you can hit me up on social media as well. I'll throw those links in the description of this video. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.